Then let's get started. We'll look today at the learning objectives. The first objective we have is to discuss the changing regulatory climate, and we'll apply this to the essential documentation practices of the sponsor in clinical trials. The second one is to examine the required components of a trial master file, and we'll also recommend a policy for this trial master file. And lastly, we'll discuss the maintenance and quality control of the documentation. Some of you are going to call it trial master files, some of you will call it study files, but the international standard now is a TMF, or a trial master file. It is the same in the Code of Federal Regulations, it's the same in the ICH guidelines, and also in the European guidance documents. They're all referring to this now as a TMF, or a trial master file. So if we look at the required components then, to begin with, what needs to be in this file? The question we ask in the beginning is, what are some of the pitfalls and the challenges that you've experienced as you build this trial master file? Some of you may have a very well-established company or working with a well-established company that already has a setup that you must follow from the CRO standpoint. Other sponsors will ask you to develop the TMF, and you have your own SOP more than likely on a trial master file that you offer to your sponsors when they contract with you in the very beginning. So some of you have a chance to change them, some are going to work with one that's not familiar to you, and others of you will work with one that you have maybe even developed yourselves. It will all depend on the contractual agreements. Now the title again is going to vary from company to company. You'll see this when you work with the various sponsors, what the name of the documentation is going to be. But again, the standard right now is the TMF. It will be hundreds to thousands of pages long. Hundreds of pages long more likely for devices, thousands of pages for drugs. Do you work with both drugs and devices in your organization?
No, we don't do any drugs.
You don't do drugs, so it's strictly devices. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So, in the terms of the filing, it is the same. So, should you ever branch out to drugs, it will be exactly the same kind of a format. The general definition, then, is that this TMF is a collection of the essential documents for the sponsor, and it shows how they fulfilled, everybody, the requirements for conducting a study. So, as the CRO, you're representing the sponsor, but the sponsor is ultimately responsible for the entire project. In doing so, you might use this to set up the system. You're going to use it to maintain the project management, and you need then to make sure you have quality control of the document and that it's timely. Should the sponsor ask for some document, you need to be able to provide that very quickly for them. And also, more than likely, they may have their quality assurance group come and actually do an inspection on the TMF from time to time during the course of the project. That is becoming much more popular today, to have QA people from the sponsor coming to CROs and managing auditing the trial master file as the project is going on. And the reason behind that is that very often the CRO has not kept up to date with it, or has not done it in a fashion that the sponsor can then locate documents. And very commonly, if the FDA comes, they may go to the sponsor looking for that documentation and not to the CRO. And so it's important that the sponsor personnel understand how you are cataloging everything. If we look to the ICH, which is our global organization, and it was written for drugs back in the late 90s. It has been adapted by most device companies over the years. However, the language in the ICH is definitely for drugs. It doesn't talk in device language. So they'll talk to things like the investigator brochure. You might call it an investigator brochure as a device organization. You might also refer to it as a ROPI, or report of prior investigations. So that would be a good example of where you would have to translate the document, the verbiage from the ICH to make it sensible to a device organization. In the introduction to the ICH, E6 section, about essential documents, it talks about TMFs directly, and it said that they should be established before you even start the study. At the beginning of the trial, you establish your format. We need to make sure we have followed Part 11 compliance. This is something your IT group will be familiar with. Proof of validation.